what Malaysia looks like on the crypto stage. And what you can see over here is that, or what this slide is trying to highlight, is that while we may be not a massive country in terms of number of population, we are not an insignificant player in the global industry. However, the actual adoption rate of cryptocurrencies in Malaysia, while high among many of the populations worldwide, is still a very low percentage of our entire population. So let's look at what we have on the screen, right? First things in terms of mining activity, many of you may not know, but Malaysia is, I think, number 6 in the world in terms of mining activity. So we do generate a lot of flow in this particular economy, right? Yes, you're going to get a lot of news that TNB is cracking down on farms and all that. But that's, of course, there's a lot of illegal players in the space stealing power and all that. But in terms of our contribution to running the blockchain space, we are actually, among the top players there. And then down below, that is the number of, based on a previous poll, a number of Malaysian population that currently own cryptocurrency, and we are not doing too bad. We're at 3% of the population, which is a very low number. And what we do foresee is that this number is going to start growing exponentially as more and more of this information goes out there. So, we are here to make sure that it's armed with as much information as possible. Now, let me just switch to a pointer. And on the left-hand side, you can see I've listed a couple of companies that are very prominent in the cryptocurrency space, and I wanted to share that because these are actually companies that are from Malaysia, right? But these are platforms that are being used globally by the entire industry. So I just wanted to share a little bit about how Malaysia sort of is looked at in the cryptocurrency world. Now, enough of that. So let's talk about why we are here today, right? More importantly, not why we are here, but why are you here today? And one thing that we do get, and of course, I do understand that most of who we have here are also students. So I know that the when to buy, when to sell thing is not really a big deal, but we still tend to ask that question a lot more, trying to figure out what exactly is going on in this space. And we want to set the right tone, right? Why are we here? We are here to understand, not to figure out how to make money. So most important thing is I am not a financial advisor. And when we move to the Q&A at the end of the session, please feel free to throw any questions you want, but don't ask me about price. Because I'm not, if I could predict when to buy and when to sell, it would be a whole different ballgame for me anyway. But yes, so why are we here? We're here to understand and figure out what's going on in this space and how to protect ourselves in case there's a lot of scams and stuff coming out in this space as well. You know how to ask the right questions when the time came, right? So now let's go all the way back to where this began. I think what we want to do is we want to establish how this entire industry came around, and let's start from an era before this industry could exist, which is before the internet, right? And back before the internet, how is it that people would engage in trade, right? It's usually within your kampong, within your town, within your area, but most commerce is going to be hand-to-hand within your area, face-to-face. And most of the time, this means that your currency of choice is going to always be matching, right? I want to use ringgit and somebody wants to receive my ringgit, for example, right? But of course, sometime in the 90s, the internet was made available for everyone to participate in. And once the internet sort of came around, we started trading with a lot of players all around the world. And like I can imagine that for most of us, we are so used to Lazada and Shopee and all that today. But back when this started, it wasn't as easy, right? Before the world of PayPal, it wasn't really easy for me to want to spend ringgit and somebody who's giving some product from the US to want to receive that ringgit, and then there'll be a lot of barriers for me to make that transaction. So, the question very soon came up after the internet came around on, is it possible for there to exist an internet money? Now, many of us are used to trading online today. So, we might ask the question like, isn't all money internet money, right? My Maybank account, I can just transact and send someone else some money directly online, and doesn't that make it internet money? And that's not exactly what we're going for, right? And the reason why that is not internet money, it is actually traditional money being made digital that can be transacted over the internet. However, it is not an internet money because it doesn't have certain properties that the internet sort of has, or the internet takes advantage of for us to transfer value from person A to person B who is not sitting in the same area, right? So let's look at the properties that internet money should have. Number one, it should be decentralized, right? And by decentralized, what it means is, can that internet money be turned off? So you can ask the question, can the internet be turned off today? And the answer is no. A country may not like the internet. They may restrict what happens to the internet once it enters their borders, like North Korea and things like that, where they really try to stop certain information from going around, or it could be with other countries that restrict the information. But no one single country, no matter how powerful, be it the United States even, can come out and say, we'll flip a switch and turn off the internet for the entire world. That's not possible. And that's just not the case with money that is not uh, decentralized. So one of the key properties that we have to aim for is decentralization, meaning once that money exists, the transaction network of that money cannot be turned off by any one party in the entire world. This is the main property of decentralization. Next is your immutability. And immutability merely means that the entire transaction history of that particular asset can be traced. It's almost no value if I have 10 ringgit in my digital wallet and I transfer it to somebody else, and that person received that 10 ringgit, but I cannot prove that that 10 ringgit left my wallet, right? Otherwise, there'd always be doubt of whether did that 10 ringgit move hands, or is that 10 ringgit now 10 ringgit in somebody else's wallet and 10 ringgit in my wallet. Like how I would send a picture of a cat via email to someone else, right? It exists in my old inbox, and it also exists in that person's inbox, and that is a property that needs to exist for money to be valuable over the internet. Next, it needs to be secure. Obviously, you want to make sure that you don't lose control. And being decentralized, when we talk about being decentralized, we need to talk a little bit about governance. Because when you are decentralized, you're saying that there's no one party that can turn on and off the internet. There's no one party that can turn on and off the internet money. In this case, the best example is Bitcoin. So how do you develop changes in it? Like over time, you might have to adopt certain standards and properties and innovation, right? If you are a decentralized body, meaning no one person is in charge, then how on earth do you implement changes? And that's where governance comes in. So there's always a topic about who decides the future of the network. And these are the four properties that exist. And of course, if they don't exist, then you don't have a proper form of money of the internet, right? A money that is not one institution, right? So let's go to the next. So now let's talk a bit about how we mentioned using fiat money on the internet today. And this example obviously is an easy one to, you can have US dollars on the other end, you can have renminbi, you can have the yen or Thai baht or whatever, but is fiat today internet money, right? And how do we define that, right? I can spend ringgit and buy something on Lazada, and the seller who's based in China will receive Chinese yuan. So it feels like we have a seamless solution for that. But I think what we don't see is the underlying cost of running such a network today. So let me just show you how is it we do this today. While I am sending 1 ringgit out from my wallet to not my wallet, right? My credit card company takes the 10 ringgit that I want to buy a cup for from someone in China, right? It then goes through that credit card company. There's going to be a bank involved where they also need to get involved in probably a clearinghouse where the currency is swapped over from one asset to another, and there's going to be a lot of parties along the way that actually needs to make sure that everything runs smoothly for this to happen. We've got it to a point that it is almost seamless today, right? And we have to appreciate that we've managed to make it very, very seamless, but it is still not the most efficient because in order for this system to work, we need all of these intermediaries to exist. And these intermediaries come always, always, always with a cost, right? And the cost here doesn't necessarily mean money, right? The cost here can be something as simple as the risk you take. If you want a fast transaction, whether you want to, is there a risk for it to not be settled properly? There could be time involved. The faster you want it, or if you want it really secure, you might actually secure and fast, then you might have to pay a little bit more for that service, right? So all of these add up to a cost of friction when we run the ability to pay person A to person B via something like the internet today. We need to use intermediaries, and these intermediaries exist, and they are definitely intermediaries that exist. They are the middlemen of necessity because that's what we need for fiat currencies to change hands today. They are definitely a middleman of necessity, but that doesn't mean they come without a cost. Because can you imagine that the credit card companies, the clearing houses, the banks, all of these come with costs? Because if I am going to be part of the supply chain of providing value from person A to person B, then I want to make sure that my books are clean, right? I need to make sure that my books are good. So I need to make sure that I have proper regulatory compliance. I've got good internet security. I've got the infosec personnel, customer support, a building to run in, computers, the network, security experts to make sure that there's nothing wrong. All of these add costs to running the networks that we run today in order for us to transact online. So the conversation that we're having is mainly making sure that the participants in these intermediaries are not doing bad things along the way, right? And obviously, we are incentivizing these entities to not do something bad. But where we are trying to go with internet money from the incentive to don't do bad things to switch it to can't do bad things, meaning you cannot even do bad things if you want to. And then, we're going to try and figure out how we're going to get there. So now, in 2008, this is, well, among our industry, the famous white paper. For many of you, maybe you haven't really seen it yet. You may have heard the term Bitcoin being thrown around, but what Bitcoin really, really is, right, is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. This is its most fundamental breakdown. Is if you want to figure out what it's here for, look at the first highlight in the line there. It says a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash that will allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Right? And of course, further down, you have to say prevent double spending, which is the example I gave earlier, and be able to track the history of transactions and so on and so forth. But the primary reason for this digital cash to exist is that it needs to exist so that it doesn't need to go through a financial institution. Now, right? When did it really begin? So I include this slide because I really want to highlight to everyone that's looking to learn about more about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and whatever, right? Is for them to realize that it didn't just happen in 2008. Yes, many people will talk about being in Bitcoin since 2009, 2010. That's true, but they also give a false impression that this is a technique that came to be overnight and aid by this Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a party that none of us know who it is. We don't know, is it a guy, a girl, a group of people, right? But what has happened is that this image of a entity that has come around and suddenly come up with this brilliant solution to peer-to-peer for a peer-to-peer electronic cash system is not correct, right? Because this is actually something that has been ongoing for many, many years. And we don't know it because there was many failed attempts along the way, right? So while in 2008, the Bitcoin white paper came out, it actually started all the way back in the 90s. We actually had many previous predecessors to Bitcoin, like DigiCash, eGold, B-Money, BitGold, Hashcash, and many others. There's even more centralized attempts, like PayPal falls under that group as well, which is an attempt to provide this payment rails, right? But Bitcoin was not an overnight magic solution. It was actually built over like decades, really, more than a decade of work had actually gone into trial and errors and previous rollouts that actually came out and provided the world with something that is decentralized, immutable, secure, and has a form of governance that can work. So I just want to highlight that because I don't like that image where it magically appeared like this magical solution came in overnight. Right now, let's talk a bit about peer-to-peer transactions online, like the payment from, in this case, Ali to Bob, to try and highlight the difference between a traditional transaction. By traditional here, let me outline that it is not traditional as in cash changing hands physically, but traditional as in a digital currency version of ringgit to either yuan or US dollar or Thai baht or something like that, right? How we do that today, um, if you look on the top, is by, as we mentioned earlier, running through intermediaries, right? The moment I make a payment for something in Malaysia, somebody in the US would probably get his payment in whichever currency he wants, and it runs through all the intermediaries. Now, what we mentioned earlier is that it is smooth today. It's frictionless. It's almost perfect where whenever we send, the other party will receive it quite fast. Now, the problem that we face is not so much what happens when it is working, because when it's working fine, it's fast and sweet. But what happens when something breaks down? That that is actually what I would rather focus on. Because once something breaks down, like for example, if Ali was to send a transaction over to Bob, and Bob says he received it, that's fine. He would have seen the balance in his account. But what happens if Bob doesn't receive it, right? So now we're in a world where Ali said he sent money to Bob, but Bob says it's not in my account. Now we actually have to figure out where along this value supply chain, the value transfer supply chain, did it break down? Was it intermediary A, B, or C? Or was it even Ali himself who didn't really send the transaction? And which is the party that's involved? Are we going to spend some time talking to customer support? Are we going to ask Ali to try and provide more proof of transaction to figure out whether it is Bob's bank that's a problem or Ali's bank that's a problem and things like that? And what this introduces is an element of maybe, right? When you introduce an element of maybe A, maybe B, maybe C, maybe Ali, maybe Bob that's trying to be a bad participant in the space, it is not something that can be resolved immediately, right? So in most transactions, money goes through, business can go on. But when money doesn't go through, we all have to pause for a moment, waste our time trying to figure out where it is. Now let's compare that to the world of a digital asset transaction below. And in this example, I gave Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin runs on the concept of a blockchain. And how a blockchain really makes the biggest impact is by eliminating all the intermediaries between Ali and Bob, right? And what happens is in a blockchain, you only have one point of reference to look at. We call that the single source of truth. And that's actually, if there's any one thing that we want to take away, what's the difference between traditional and the digital asset transaction is that a blockchain provides you a single source of truth that you can always refer to tell whether someone has made a transaction or not. So now if Ali sends 100 ringgit worth of Bitcoin to Bob, right? Ali just needs to tell Bob, hey, I've made the transaction. Here is my transaction ID. And Bob can just take that transaction ID, look it up, and Bob will see if the transaction is yes or no, right? So if the transaction is yes, then Ali has paid Bob, and Bob can send whatever product that Ali paid for. And if the transaction is no, Bob will just say, send the money or business is over, stop wasting our time, let's move on with our lives. So the big key difference here is that without the need of intermediaries, we've achieved this world where we don't have to waste time figuring out if a transaction failure was a maybe to a simple yes or no solution. Did the transaction happen? Yes or no? Because we all look at the same source of truth. Now, let's expand a little bit on that. What is the concept of the single source of truth, right? And how the blockchain sort of achieves this is by having a distributed ledger, right? Or you can think of a distributed ledger as being a public ledger that exists everywhere for everyone at the same time, and it's always the same main ledger that exists. Now, I like to use the example of the buku 35 because, well, I'm old. I think with the younger crowd, I probably need to find a different example sometime in the future, right? But what a buku 35 is if I use the example below, is back in the day of maybe our parents or grandparents, we would have a running tab with maybe the local kedai runcit, the local shopkeeper, and how we keep each other honest about our open tabs, right? Maybe this week I went and pick up one bag of rice, one bottle of oil, and some sugar, right? Ali will write it down that I owe him how much. The shopkeeper will write it down how much I owe, and of course, in my book, I will also keep that same copy to say that I owe the shopkeeper so much and so much, right? And how of course we keep each other honest is that each of us has a copy of this book, and if the shopkeeper changes his entry and it doesn't match my entry, then I could call him out. But of course, it's only a one-to-one person argument here, so the dispute is 50-50, right? Now, how Bitcoin's ledger, or not Bitcoin's ledger, how the distributed ledger sort of um, this is making sure that not only does Ali and Bob have a copy of this ledger, but basically this ledger exists over the entire network. Now, we'll go a little bit into how we achieve this later, but I'm not going to go into too much technical detail. I will provide some references at the end of the talk that you can also go in to really figure out how it works. But I will give you a bird's eye view of roughly how it works, right? So now, what we're looking at in the distributed ledger is an example of how we achieve that single source of truth. And quite simply put, we do so by making sure that every copy that is distributed on the network is exactly the same. So if Ali or Bob looks at any point of the network and wants to refer to the transactions on the network, it is the same book. So it will always be the same single source of truth. Now, if you compare that on the left-hand side with how it would work in a centralized environment, like what a traditional transaction might look like with intermediaries, right, is that each intermediary along the way will have to govern their own book, right? They have to govern their own ledgers to make sure that the records coming in and leaving into the next party in the intermediary supply chain, they want to make sure that if anything goes wrong, it is not their particular participation in the supply chain that is causing the error. So how do you do that? You end up paying a lot of money for regulatory audits and security, and the entire list of things that you probably need to make sure that your network functions well in this connected network of intermediaries. Now, on the right-hand side, that doesn't matter anymore because every copy of the ledger that is distributed is the same. We actually don't have to worry about party A making his ledger different from party B, from party C, and so on and so forth. And how we do that, right? We're going to go a little bit into the world of mining and staking and things like that, but not too deep. But how we achieve a distributed ledger is by participants in the network completely that are competing for to achieve certain things in the network. They keep the ledger up. Now, yes, you're going to hear the word mining a lot, or staking and things like that these days, but essentially what they are is trying to achieve the very same thing all the time, right? The first thing that trying to achieve this consensus for a ledger, trying to achieve the how do you say, an updated version of the ledger is that all participants in the network, validators in the network, are trying to fight for, number one, the rights to update the latest version of that decentralized public ledger. Then after that, they will be responsible for collecting the latest transactions that they can see and updating that ledger, right? And then after that, they have to distribute their version of that ledger to the network so that other validators can confirm that what they are doing is correct, right? So whether it's mining or staking or any other version of proof of whatever, the idea is you're trying to fight for the rights to update the latest ledger and then share it out to the network and make everyone else checks your homework to make sure that you're not trying to con the network, right? And this is where the distributed ledger is achieved, right? By making sure that it is distributed and validated among many, many, many parties. Now, what is it that we are doing whenever we are, um, in the case of miners, right, or validators, what is it are they doing? Now, in the network, first things first, you have to realize that it is always only going to be one way only, meaning the previous block will happen and the block will contain all the transactions of that block. The block after that will be compiled and mined by the next successful person to achieve that right to update. So you have block 199, block 200, block 201, block 202, block 203, and so on and so forth, right? And what's happening here is that the validators are basically fighting for the right to update each of these blocks into the distributed ledger. Each block you can think of as a page in the ledger, really, right? What am I trying to show with this slide is that usually the transactions they are and what the validators are doing is making sure that, in this case, let me show you an example, right? These are all the same participants in a different timestamp for 199, 200, 201. But in this case, let's just say Chong had sent 20 Bitcoin to Dina, right? And it was validated in block 200. Now, when block 201, the miner that's responsible for validating it, saw that one of the transactions is Dina trying to send 10 Bitcoin to Eric. And Dina's wallet in this particular instance had received 20 Bitcoin prior. So when that validator node tries to validate that transaction, it knows that the person sending the funds actually had the right amount of funds. So it can validate and confirm that that's a valid transaction, right? As opposed to maybe Eric in block 202 trying to send 100 Bitcoin back to Dina, which he does not have because maybe this wallet had never received any other transaction and only received 10, has a balance of 10 Bitcoin, but he's trying to send 100. What's happening is the miners are coming in, and as they are validating that latest batch of network transactions, they are making sure that the participants who are sending those transactions are not trying to mess with the network, right? And the beauty of the system is that you don't know who the validator is going to be because it's very random in the world of mining. You don't know who the next validator is going to be. So you can't really go and try and undercounter, try and pay somebody off to say, please validate my next block. And it doesn't matter because the person after that will revalidate the previous block. And it's always going to be because random, it's always going to be a challenge for anyone trying to introduce malicious transactions to the network to try and do so and convince every participant of the validators that it's a valid transaction. right? And this is where the miners come in. So again, let's zoom in a little bit more, and I promise I won't go much more into the actual technical stuff. I will leave some resources for that. But what's happening with the in the world of miners, when I say that they are fighting for the rights to update, right? What's happening is there are batches of transactions that are being compiled. Now, this is a very, very, very big oversimplification. In all honesty, there's actually a lot of nuances that go into this. Like, for example, every miner will see a different batch of transactions, but I've simplified it just so that we can have a visual representation of what's going on, right? So you can imagine that block 203 is going to have a bunch of transactions that are happening right now. And block 202 has already been is already being worked on by a bunch of miners. So what these miners are actually doing is they're compiling a bunch of transactions into a block, and they're trying to find a valid key to lock up that latest batch of transactions. Now, whoever achieves the right, by and it is purely random, right? It is a mathematical formula that in the example, in the resources I will give will show you exactly how it works. But what it is basically a very complex mathematical formula that is very hard to solve, and you can only solve it by going randomly into it. And what's happening with a miner is that they are all randomly throwing these keys to see who is the first one that can get lucky enough to find the right key to lock that particular block, right? So what happens is that if a miner has compiled all the transactions, right, and validated that the transactions that they are trying to solve for are valid, meaning Ali sending to Bob had the money, there's no one trying to make false transactions and things like that, they find the right key, they lock that transaction up. And basically what's happened is they've sealed it up, and you'll notice that every block has a little bit of information from the block before that, and that's also intentional because once you lock up a block, right, it is still tied to the block before it. And if you were to change any of the trend or try and change any transactions from the block before, it actually changes the value of every block after that. So that's sort of where the concept of blockchain comes in, right? Every block, once it's validated, locks in the history of the transactions. So anyone trying to mess around with the history of the transactions that are on the blockchain are going to change the latest value, and people immediately know that, hey, this is not the valid entry in the latest update. So you can see here that once a miner has successfully found the right key, it's going to lock that up, and that block then gets relegated into this dotted line area. See, over here it's unlocked, over here it's locked up, meaning somebody had successfully found the key. They've been paid a reward for finding that key, and the rewards is something we can talk about, but it's not important to what we're talking about here. But basically, the miners get an incentive to be the first one to lock it up. They get paid for it, and that transaction gets thrown into this dotted area. And this dotted area is basically where the decentralized public ledger exists, right? Because it was validated by a randomly selected validator and now updated to the public ledger. Once the validator has done its job, it joins the decentralized ledger and is now being propagated all over the network so that anyone referring to that ledger will always refer to the same version of that ledger. Okay. Well, I hope that sort of gave you an idea of how is it that we achieve this distributed ledger via mining and making sure that the miners remain anonymous and things like that. However, if it's not clear enough, please at the end of this talk, feel free to throw as many questions as you want. I'll try my best to answer it for you. So yeah. So after that discussion, right, we went from what the key, how they achieve the rights to update by throwing as many keys as possible. Once they achieve that right, they update the ledger, then they distribute it to the network to be validated. And now the network has spread that entire version of the public blockchain around, and it is it is now able to be used as the latest version of the single source of truth of network transactions, right? So this one ledger is copied and pasted across all the validators around the world. So it's very hard for someone to make a fake entry after that, right? So zooming in again, why we're back to that single source of truth. Now, I want to go back to the earlier topic where we mentioned removing the maybe, right? We were talking about in a traditional world, there's always a maybe of whether a transaction is, if it's good, yeah, it's good. But if it's not good, there's always a maybe of where it broke down. So why is that important today? Now, this is sort of where it gets a bit more into why this is getting very popular today, right? Why was blockchain not a thing in 2008, 2009? Is a few things needed to happen, but let's look at what the industry sort of looks like right now. The world has gone through several industrial revolutions. We had, in the 1800s, we had machinations into mass production, and then in the 80s, we had automation come into the picture, right? And that's how the industry evolved along. But right now, we are in a new industrial revolution. And this industrial revolution, we call it Industry 4.0, the Industrial Revolution 4.0, right, is where a lot of industries start to integrate not only physical factories, but the cyber physical world as well. And we're talking about, integration with AI or enterprise resource management applications that help manage companies and things like that, right? So that so that uh, it helps you make business decisions that are rapid. And the problem when you are looking at the previous industrial revolutions is that all the way up to now, almost all industries are always people run. So it always made sense that we hired, how do you say, accounts managers or finance managers to sign off on reports and things like that, right? Because during that time, uh, we all wanted to. There's no speed rushing your report, right? But once you move into a people or system run ecosystem, many of those systems want to have immediate results, like whether a transaction is valid or not. And without the maybe, it cannot be that's probably a valid transaction. It needs to be yes or no, that's a valid transaction or not, right? So when we go into the world where we're talking with AI and computer systems and things like that, the language we need to speak is always yes or no, not maybe, because computer doesn't understand maybe, right? And another thing to consider when we are working in this space, why blockchains are very interesting, is of course the availability of the transaction data, right? Now, give you two examples on the left. The upper example is how we sort of run most companies today, where as an example, right, trying to compile what the latest transaction report is going to look like, we would first gather all the source documents, whether it's your receipts or whether it's the proof of payment, whether it's transactions with your vendors, whether it's all the online entries, right? And then we compile it into a report, and usually it goes through processing by a department, whether it's in on your accounting side or anything like that, where they validate all the transactions, and it's usually signed off by a manager. And then that particular report, once it's acknowledged by a manager, will then be considered a valid report, whether it's a weekly report, a monthly report, or something like that. You can then use those reports to try and make decisions for your business. Now, in the world of blockchains on the bottom, right, Bitcoin being an example, we also have the gathering, processing, and publishing, which is similar to your reporting, except the gathering and validation of each transaction, the settlement of each transaction is happening every time a block is mined. And just to give you an example, right, in the world of traditional validation of your data, you would need some human to validate whether the data is good. You need an audit to make sure your data is good, right? That might take sometimes days or weeks or months. In the world of Bitcoin, for example, settlement happens every 10 minutes, right? A transaction, once it's validated by a miner, is considered settled, right? In the world of Ethereum, I think that's about 20 seconds. Different blockchains have different block cycles, but the beauty of it is whenever transactions happen and they are validated by a miner, you can pretty much consider it as a settled transaction, and that transaction can then be used to decide what you want to do with that information. There is no real chance that maybe the source document or the receipt was faked or anything like that. It's a valid settled transaction. And what that allows you to do is, if you look on the right hand side, is have a source of data that companies can refer to, again, the single source of truth, to validate whether transactions are real. In the old days, we used to have to keep ourselves and our vendors honest by keeping a record of each other's books to make sure that all parties are being clean, right? But in the world of the digital asset transactions, you don't really need to know what the other party is doing, because you can validate directly on the blockchain. You don't need to look at or communicate with the other party. You can just refer to the blockchain and know whether a particular transaction is good or no good, right? So why is this important? Why is this suddenly so important that you can validate transactions with the other party without even needing to really ask the other party for any proof of transactions and things like that? And that's because crypto has gone way beyond, like way outside of the world of just sending money from person A to B, right? It has gone into the world of, well, as an example over here, you have your currencies, right? This is transferring value from A to B. But you also have abilities, now that we know that we can securely send value without knowing the other party, the next question is, why can't we program that information as well and make that programming information public, and incorporate contracts into that data, so that if you come up with a contract for say a gardener in the future, say, if you cut my grass, if that is completed, then this money will then appear in your wallet and things like that, right? It's a really cruddy example, but just an overarching example, where the idea that you can now not only transact value, but transact information and signatures and valid and proof that certain properties are met over the internet, right? So Ethereum actually was the first to do that. Ethereum is this one over here that came around in 2015, where they built programming into the blockchain as well. So not only can you send money from person A to B, you can stipulate parameters like send this money from person A to B only if criteria C is met and things like that. And just from that alone, you start seeing a lot of different use cases. Now, on the screen here, we see the various different types of cryptocurrencies that exist in the market. You have NFTs, which are very hot today. There's a lot of news buzz around them. You have Bitcoin, which is currently accepted as one of the best stores of value for the cryptocurrency space. There are also cryptocurrencies that exist to provide utility in market making, to make sure that there's liquidity in the market. There's utilities, right, based on either smart contract or centralized entities, where you have identity solutions, where you can decentralize the identity, your identity online. You have over here what we call stable coins, which are cryptocurrencies that are backed to either the US dollar or some other commodity or fiat currency that doesn't move. So there's actually a lot of different types of digital currencies today, all falling back on the concept of the blockchain distributed ledger, so that everyone can always be certain transactions are valid by referring to the single source of truth. Now, right, here's another example of what has happened since the introduction of being able to program the transaction of not only money, but program the parameters of how you transact, right? Here are DeFi projects that exist, and DeFi here stands for decentralized finance. Initially, it was decentralized banking. With Bitcoin, it was decentralized cash payment from party A to party B. Now, in the world of decentralized finance, it's not only cash payment from A to B, you even have things like let's see an example. You have lending services, right? People can actually do lending services without knowing the other party, right? It's a decentralized financial platform. There's decentralized insurance companies coming up. You have marketplaces where people can go and trade. It's actually this screenshot that do it justice, right? If I wanted to show you how big the current decentralized finance world that is being built on just using the concept of being able to decentralize services that are provided not only by banks but by insurance companies and lending services and liquidity providers, right? It would fill the screen, I think, 10 or 20 times over. It's a really, really big economy. And this all comes around because we can transact securely over a network that is provably secure without needing to trust anyone in that network because the validators are all random, right? Now, if you are trying to understand more about all these different entities that exist, please take it slow because there is so much information out there. It is very easy to get lost or go down rabbit holes and end up thinking that you are trying to FOMO into the wrong projects, thinking because as you come into this world, right, or start exploring the world of digital assets and things like that, you are going to run into a lot of influencers and a lot of people who claim to know where Bitcoin is going or claim to invest money for you and things like that. So you really need to start asking the right questions. Many of them hide behind the veneer of a cryptocurrency. So I would recommend going in whenever someone tries to bring a cryptocurrency to you or you want to do research on a particular cryptocurrency, these are good places to start. On the left-hand side is the biggest one in the world right now. It is coinmarketcap.com. Not far away and in fact better in many aspects is coingecko.com, a Malaysian company. Please go and support our guys. And not that they need the support, they're doing pretty well right now. But both these sites are really good places for you to start, right? And what you do in the site is when you have a crypto you want to find out about, after this, I will let me I will give you a run through of what it could be like. Let's just use coinmarketcap.com here, right? Right. I'll show you how you can use these aggregators to find your way around, right? So in the example, you know what? Sorry about that. We should use coin because we are Malaysian. Bear with me. All right. So what you can do by going into these aggregator sites, right? What these sites are doing is they are taking information from all the different networks around the world that are trading cryptocurrencies, and they are aggregating it into one area. So many people would come here to check the price. So CoinGecko, of course, in this case, I came in from a Malaysian IP. They're showing me the price in ringgit. But if I were to want to know more about a particular currency, I can always click on that currency. If someone tells me that they are having this new magical coin, I can even search for it over here. But by coming into this particular coin, I can see a lot of information like where it's being traded, what is it about, right? And then under the overview, right, I can even start to read up a lot about what it is, right? And sometimes if a coin has been proven to be a financial fraud, you even get information on top of the page to say that this is a financial fraud. You don't rely on that because there's always a lot of new projects coming up that may not have been identified as being fraudulent just yet. So it's not a good idea if just because it doesn't have the fraud label on top that you say it's not a fraud, but do more research, right? This is a good site to come to. It'll tell you what the token is about, what information is behind it, where it's being traded, where the website is, what are the social media channels that exist for those entities and things like that. And this is for everything here. So let's just click on some completely other coin, right? So let's take DAI, right? And my internet is rather slow today. Sorry. Right? So in the world of this is just one other cryptocurrency DAI. I can come in here, look under general, go all the way to the bottom, and what CoinGecko has done is compiled information about what it is. I can click on read more, what is the maker, how do I obtain DAI, and things like that. So it's always good to come into this aggregators to find more information. It's a good place to start because if you go directly into the Twitter or YouTube, there's a lot of information out there, and much of the information might be from people who are trying to give biased information one side or the other. So always do your own research, right? Take the time out, go into each cryptocurrency that you're trying to study and go and figure out what the big deal is behind it. And of course, if you're unsure, please reach out to us at Synergy, right? I'll give you a link at the end. It'll be also in this deck you're more than welcome to always reach out to us and ask us questions. If you're not sure of a project or someone's trying to sell you some durian coin or kopi coin or something like that, feel free to knock on our door and ask us about it. We'll be very happy. A very big part of what we do, because we are tied with the Securities Commission of Malaysia, is that we are also entrusted to make sure that the information being shared around is helping the new people coming into this space not be taken over by malicious players, right? So that's an example of where you can start whenever you're trying to learn more about a new coin. And then from there, you can start jumping into the social media channels and all that. But please always keep an open mind, right? To understand and to know that there's always going to be biased players trying to show you one coin or another. So always keep an open mind and reach out to people in the industry if you're not sure. Of course, here's another resource that's very useful when people are coming up to you and maybe trying to show you the latest crypto that will make you $1 million overnight. Come and check and see if it appears on the investor alert list. Please know to walk away really fast. But even if it doesn't appear, because many new companies, again, are not always being vetted, take it with a pinch of salt and do your own research. But of course, if it appears here, by all means, just avoid them, right? Here's the financial consumer alert list from Bank Negara as well. Also a very useful resource for referring to entities and things like that. Now, question is, in Malaysia, how do you buy, sell, and trade for cryptocurrencies? Currently, we have several regulated exchanges by the Securities Commissions of Malaysia. These are the current 4 only regulated exchanges that exist in the market right now, right? Anyone outside of this is an unregulated exchange, so you don't get certain securities that certain criteria that we need to achieve in order to be a regulated entity in Malaysia. For example, any crypto that you store with us is actually held by a custodian. It's not held by us and things like that. If you transact a lot on an unregulated exchange, they don't need to meet such criteria, so you don't really know what kind of safety nets you have. So just know that when you trade in Malaysia, you can trade on regulated exchanges. And the other advantage that we have is these are the only 4 exchanges that will allow you to directly convert a cryptocurrency to Ringgit Malaysia and deposit and extract back from bank account in Malaysia. Other exchanges will not really have a /MYR pair with a cryptocurrency, right? And of course, at the bottom here, these are the current assets that are that are recognized by the SC in Malaysia. We expect this list to grow. We acknowledge that, we are rather conservative in growing the accepted cryptocurrencies in Malaysia, but I believe this list will grow very fast in 2022 and 2023. But currently, as of today, these are the 5 currencies. You have Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash as legal, as recognized digital assets in the Malaysian by the Malaysian Securities Commission of Malaysia, right? And of course, if you want to, you can always come and find us at Synergy. You can also go to synergy.com and find us. All our social medias are there. You can reach out to us in case you have any questions. We will be very happy to answer any questions that you have, whether it's related to trading, whether it's related to what crypto is. We'd be very happy to help you out. And also, if someone is shilling you something, we can help you try and figure out what's going wrong. If someone, if you've been a victim of something, we can give you some advice on how to go about, reaching the right people and making the right reports and things like that as well. So, please feel free to reach out to us whenever you need to. And thank you. That actually is the end of my current presentation. I do want to leave as much time as possible to open up for Q&As because I think that's usually the place that we get a lot of information shared out. So so Dr. Hui, if you'd like to, I'd like to finish up here so that we can open up for as much Q&A as possible.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Job, for sharing a very, very informative presentation to all of us. I think that the Q&A session will give us more practical insights on cryptocurrency rather than we merely read your slide there, because as for me, I also have a few questions. But by the way, I open the floor to the audience. If you have any question to ask Mr. Job today, take this opportunity to post your question to Mr. Job. You can either post it in the chat box, or you can open your mic to ask your questions. Okay. But I think first of all, usually I will first raise my questions. So, Mr. Job, just now I heard from you that you say that miners are the validators of all the block transactions in the blockchains. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And beside
depends. Sorry, go ahead.
So beside miner being the validator, so miner will get the Bitcoin. Because I heard from friends that miner need to open their computers 24 hours every day to search for the Bitcoin. Is it correct? So miner yes.
Yeah, nowadays it's no longer your computer anymore. Because when Bitcoin first started, yes, your computer was powerful enough to mine, but because it gets more and more difficult as more people join, you need very specialized hardware that needs to run 24/7 in order for it to be profitable, and they take a lot of power, right? Of course, when you say miner, it also depends on which type of network, because you have miners for the proof of work environment, then you have people that do staking for proof of stake and things like that, but same concept, right? You need to always be available so that when you have randomly got the right to update, you update it and get paid for it, right? So yes, they would have to leave their systems running 24/7, just so that if they randomly get assigned to do the job, they need to be there to do the job. If they get assigned to do the job and they are not there to do the job, somebody else will get it, then rugi lah, the next person will collect the reward. So yes, you're right in that sense. So they are being paid to validate the network.
So there's a limit of the minings, meaning that the quantity of Bitcoin, is that limitations there?
No, it's not actually, because what the miners actually get today is two things, right? Number one, they are getting a reward, and that reward only exists today because they want to incentivize miners to participate. But every few years, that reward gets cut by half. That's called a halving, and you will hear that a lot as well. What happens is Bitcoin, initially when you successfully mine the block, you get paid 50 Bitcoin whenever you mine a block. You successfully become the validator for that round. You get voted as the validator because you found the right key. not voted, sorry, you successfully find the right key, so you get the rights to be the validator. Then you validate and you do your job, right? You get paid 50 Bitcoin. But back then, 50 Bitcoin was, few cents, you know. And then over time, when Bitcoin went up in value, the amount of Bitcoin you get went from 50 to 25, and then after that it's 12.5, and then after a couple of years it'll go down to 6.25, and then it'll go down to half and half and half, all the way down until there's barely anything left. But the missing part of that equation is the fees that you're getting. So not only are they getting the reward, but the fees that people are paying in the transaction fees, that is also being given to the miner, right? But right, when it first started, if you get 50 Bitcoin and 0.001 Bitcoin in fees, that's worth nothing. But 0.001 Bitcoin today starts going into the hundreds and eventually maybe thousands well, it's in the hundreds and thousands of ringgit, over time, right? Sorry, it's in the hundreds of ringgit right now if you receive some fees for your mining work. But the idea is that as the Bitcoin network is adopted more and more, and there's more value locked into the network and transacting per hour, those fees will be worth much more than the Bitcoin you get paid as a reward. So eventually, when the mining rewards are finished, just the fees alone are more than enough incentives for miners to keep running. And that's already happening today.
Oh, okay. So it means the Bitcoin price matter, right?
Well, not it will matter, and it does matter, obviously, because so what happens if the price drops? Then those mining farms that are more efficient, right? That the lower cost justifies still running the machines because they are paying a power cost, right? Right now, the farms that are running, they just need to make sure they either make sure that they are paying uh, their rewards are more than enough to cover the cost of running, or some of them are just mining and are hoping to sell in the future when the value goes up, if the value goes up. So that's a bit of there's risk and exposure there, of course. But most of the time they will plan, right? So if the price of Bitcoin goes so high and that little bit of reward they get is worth so much, it's worth running all these machines. But if let's say the price drops, they'll be like, oh, okay, the inefficient machines, the older models will turn it off because not profitable anymore, right? So that's where the difficulty in the network will fluctuate. So depending on the value, the miners might turn on and turn off different machines that are running on the network.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There's one question posted in the chat box from Dr. Nohafiza. She asks, is Ethereum really better than Bitcoin?
Is an apple better than an orange? I don't know, right? But okay, so maybe I'll talk a bit more detail about the differences between Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it really is an apples to orange comparison. It's two completely different products. So in the world of Bitcoin, what they're really good with is being the main proof of work, no questions asked. They only try and achieve one thing, which is a peer-to-peer network for transacting value. And of course, right now they are coming in with concepts of smart contract and they call layer 2 transfer solutions, but that happens on top of their network. The core network of Bitcoin, its main concern is transferring value from person A to B and having a lot of people, a lot of validators around the world. It has the most validators around the world, ensuring that that network is secure. In the world of Ethereum, Ethereum is trying to achieve a different goal. Ethereum is trying to become a global computer where you can run programs on the network. So Ethereum not only is about transferring value from person A to person B, it's about running the example I gave earlier, the DeFi applications and things like that, right? It's like running the decentralized insurance platforms, the decentralized banking, maybe loans, maybe in the future you will have decentralized marketplaces, decentralized, um, spaces or even services, right? So Ethereum's main purpose is building that ecosystem. And They are actually, I am very impressed, of course, with Ethereum's aim. So, but there's also background pros and cons, right? Because Ethereum is actually in development right now, trying to move from what they call proof of work, which is similar to Bitcoin. But then they're trying to move to a proof of stake environment, because proof of stake, the biggest difference between proof of stake and proof of work is that proof of stake is cheaper to run, right? Bitcoin costs a lot of money to run today. But for that money, you get securities that are, you get certain safety nets to make sure that you know that network is secure. When you move to a proof of stake environment, it's cheaper to run and it's much more of a lottery-based system. But the fact is, it's cheaper to run. And there's, of course, some give and take on the security parameters and things like that. So Ethereum is in the process of moving on to that. So if anybody talks about the risks there, it's mostly about the clarity of the roadmap for Ethereum to achieve that, right? There's a lot of solutions that Ethereum needs to resolve in order to scale properly. So in the world of Bitcoin, for example, if I transact from person A to B, it costs me maybe a couple of dollars for the transaction fee. Today, because of the scaling issues that Ethereum is facing, one thing that's happening is their fees, right? For me to transact in Ethereum, it can be very painful. If I decide to transact on layer on the main chain at the wrong time of day when the network is busy, the cost of sending a 1,000 ringgit, I might have to pay like 100 or 200 ringgit sometimes if you're not if you're not aware of the other solutions that are out there. So it's an evolving space. They have some very promising solutions on the horizon for Ethereum, but I think if there's a good or bad to talk about, I would say the clarity of their roadmap moving from proof of work to proof of stake and the full scalability solutions are not fully on the table. It's being discussed as we speak, so it's not a complete solution just yet. But the promise of Ethereum can be very massive. So pros and cons between Bitcoin and Ethereum over there. Right? I hope that answered your question on that space.
Okay, so maybe Dr. Norafisa, you can further ask if Mr. Job answer still have some queries to use later on. Okay, there's another questions posted by Dr. Tan here. She asked whether the China digital yuan is going to influence the Bitcoin and the other crypto.
Oh, well, in short, right? If and when the digital yuan does hit, then the answer is yeah, certainly, right? It will definitely impact the space, whether it's for good or bad. We can't really say for certain, but and this is personal opinion, is that the more the more central banks or institutions that run under governments around the world adopt a digital standard of currency, the better it is, because now it is more seamless to transact between those countries' digital currency and the global internet money space, right? Because when you have let's face it, right? Countries will need to manage their own economies, and many countries, the releasing of that, if you want to just say, okay, our illegal tender is purely Bitcoin, but the volatility and control is no longer in our hands, that is a massive risk, right? So most countries, we see, would want to probably form of digital, a central bank digital currency, so that they still maintain the policy of the monetary policy within their own economies, right? So, like for example, in the case of China, if they adopt a digital, how do you say, yuan, and they did something like say, if you own a digital yuan wallet, you're not allowed to transact with Bitcoin at all. If we find out it's you and we'll crack down on you, then that's a negative impact to the space at least, right? Because now the China economy is removed from the internet economy. The internet economy, people will be afraid to transact, and people will have to go through backdoor channels and things like that. But if they said that, yeah, you're more than free to transact with the global decentralized economy under certain parameters, then that's really good, because now you have that entire economy worth billions and billions and trillions, right? Now being able to interface with this global economy and generate a lot of churn between the economies, right? And there could be a lot of value to be added. So that's positive. It all depends on which way the regulations go for each country that decides to participate in the global digital economy at some point. Right? As an example for China, anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, it will impact, yes, 100%. Which way? Let's find out.
Okay. And actually, I think a lot of us have a very common questions and about what drive the crypto pricing volatility. Yeah. So the price of the crypto, is it backed by certain value or that is valueless? And what kind of
I think
for investor, what kind of analysis they can do if they want to like stock market, we can do some technical analysis, fundamental analysis. So is that any way to analyze the moving price of the Bitcoin?
This is definitely outside of my depth. I'm
Okay.
a horrible day trader, right? So I don't do analysis my own because I don't trust myself to do good analysis. But what I do know is that I look at the long-term value. What backs my interest in this space is the fact that it is going to be more and more frictionless when you build products in the world that doesn't require central entities to manage them, right? The costs of those products go down. The accessibility of those products to a global market grows up, because it's no longer a P&L decision whether a bank wants to open a branch in Mongolia anymore, right? Because the Bitcoin network just exists, right? Of course, I don't want to diss Mongolia. Obviously, they do have good banks and proper economy there. But I'm talking about the rural outskirt towns of some rural area, right? HSBC is not going to open a branch there if there's no value to be extracted from having a branch run somewhere there. So in the world of Bitcoin, however, that exists as a global network, payment network, or in the world of Ethereum, that exists as a global network, that as long as someone in that village, somehow gets connected via the internet, they can actually have people access banking services from those networks. So whenever things like that happen, you introduce value, right? These are participants that have money that want to transact with the economy, but right now they are locked outside of the digital economy because it just costs too much to introduce them to it. But in a global network that runs on like Bitcoin or Ethereum or one of the future blockchains that are coming up, right? The only thing that you really need to participate is an internet connection. And suddenly you have access to lending services and things like that. So suddenly those services that maybe used to be limited to the market of this country plus this country plus this country have a much bigger market, right? These are all people who are coming in, like farmers in certain countries, like in Africa. It costs them 60 to 80% to take a loan to buy fertilizer, because they are limited to the people willing to give them loans only in the physical economy around them. But when you have access to the internet, which many of them do now, right? They are able to access a global market of people willing to loan them, as long as they show that they have a good history of paying back. They might be able to get those loans at maybe 10% or 5% or even less over time as their reputation builds up. So that money that used to be tied to that local economy is now open to participate in either the Bitcoin space, the Ethereum space, or one of the other cryptocurrencies that are coming up. So what you're doing is you're unlocking value that are currently stuck in certain areas because they don't have access to traditional banking services. In the future, you're going to get people who want to provide these services be able to provide to them via the global decentralized internet, right, markets. So what we see is backing that, right? Like, you would want to talk about the value of a project is based on the amount of value that they currently maybe have either locked into decentralized finance, or the number of markets they participate in that introduces value, then that's the kind of fundamental that you want to look at, right? How big, like a good way of thinking about it is, if you convince everyone that holds gold today, right, that are using gold as their main store of value, if you say, hey, instead of making your main store of value 100% gold, why not you just switch 1, 2, or 5% to Bitcoin? That alone is a multi-billion dollar growth in the overall market cap value of Bitcoin, right? So you have to think in that sense. Like, this ecosystem is providing services. What other existing markets will eventually be absorbed into this particular market? I think cryptocurrencies are right now at $2 trillion, market cap or something like that. I haven't last checked because that number changes so often, right? But it's, when you see that number grow, it is because it's bringing more and more people, or more and more other industry players into the space, and growing that particular economy. So it's not exactly backed by nothing, right? There is going to be, of course, the price is going to be dictated by the supply and demand. There's a ton of speculation in the market that you can't avoid, because people like are reading the market to say, oh, it's going to be worth 5 trillion in the future, therefore it's an easy investment, right? I'm going to double my value. But at the end of the day, it's still a speculation, right? Maybe a third or fourth generation cryptocurrency comes up that's better, and then the entire value from Bitcoin moves into Ethereum, or Ethereum moves into another cryptocurrency, and you are holding that, then you're going to be at a loss, right? So there's a lot of speculation in place. You got to be careful. You got to do your homework, see what are the economies being impacted by those new blockchains you probably want to invest in, and things like that, right?
So it backs to the country or national laws that to whether they allow the cryptos to flow in the economics. Is it true?
Right. Allowed to flow, meaning they don't put barriers up,
Yes.
or
Yes.
it depends, right? Because it's for a, like take for example our own country. Let's talk about Malaysia, right? We don't do stable coins here because, number one, I think we're a closed market, right, for the ringgit. And if you were to introduce something like a stable coin, suddenly anyone can just take in and out money from our economy without control. Then there's a worry. I'm certain that there's a worry from the regulator saying that, we need to have some control over this. And it's fair, right? Because they want to worry about their total the value of their economy as well. So until they find a solution, they might not be able to introduce certain types of tokens or currencies. But they also know that if they don't do it, then they also lose out from participating in this global market that's really having a lot of value. So it's up to the governments to like really balance that out, whether they want to miss out on being able to participate in this really big industry that's coming up, or they want to island themselves off and put some very strong barriers in the border, right? In which case, then there's always going to be people that arbitrage that border, right? Because when you provide a lot of regulation, then there's going to be ways that people are going to try and circumvent that regulation. And what happens is people will find ways to go around your regulation, and you will lose track of those people. So number one, you're still not blocking off that part of the economy, but at the same time, you're losing track about what's happening with your dollars in the back end, because people always find ways to circumvent if it's just black and white paper regulation. Whereas it's not a restriction on the code level, right? It's people saying you are not allowed to do this. So people will find a way to do that. And then your question is, do you want to leave it unregulated, meaning you don't get to see what's really happening, or do you want to find some way of regulating it and allowing it, but at least you're aware of what's happening in the back end, right? And then applying your rules to that. So it depends on the governments, really.
Okay. Yeah, there's a technical questions. compared to the cost of the energy that they use to mine? Is it Bitcoin comparing to the cost of the energy? This will lower the attractiveness of the Bitcoin?
Mm, well, there's two ways to look at it. Number one, I agree that Bitcoin takes a lot of power, right? There's no putting lipstick on that on that particular image, right? It's genuinely taking a lot of power. But you also need to ask what you are paying for. Now, if you really wanted to do an apple to apple comparison, right? Bitcoin is a global payment network, meaning it is actually replacing a lot of banking intermediaries to provide a network that you can transact on. If you want to do an apple to apple comparison, you also need to see what is the traditional cost, whether those banking intermediaries are the buildings they run, the cost of running those air conditioning, the staff that they hire, the power that the staff that they hire need to drive to the offices and things like that, right? So you are also having a energy footprint when you are running the traditional space. But if you look at them as individual intermediaries, it doesn't look like much. But when you look at it as the global payment network, it actually does cost quite a lot to run the traditional global payment network, right? There's cost of running your buildings and networks and things like that. It adds up. In the world of Bitcoin, it does cost a lot as well, but you are getting a global payment network system. So it costs a lot, but you have to realize what you're paying for. That doesn't mean that we don't need to find ways to make it cheaper, to consider alternative consensus in the future, like proof of stake and things like that, right? Those things actually bring down the cost of running these networks by thousands of times, right? It costs like hundreds to thousands less per transaction overall in terms of energy costs um, for running on a proof of stake network versus a proof of work. But there's technical security trade-offs in the process. So you need to also decide, what are the services you want to offer on network A and network B that can afford to have a bit less security here and things like that. But at the end of the day, you are still paying for a global payment network. So in its current cost, yeah, I think it's worth it. I think it's fine to pay that amount for what you're getting. But we do need to reduce it because it does consume a lot of power, right? And of course, as more of these companies get involved in mining, they also try and find ways to access renewable or cheaper energy, right, in order to run their mining farm. So it does help drive the people are finding ways to get cheaper power just to make sure that they can make more money from their farm. So there's an argument there as well to say that it's driving, the wedge forward in trying to find cheaper power and better resources. So, but ultimately, yeah, it does cost a lot of power to run the Bitcoin and Ethereum networks that are proof of work today. It'll get less over time, I'm certain. Or a new blockchain running on proof of stake that solves the technical restrictions that proof of work have over proof of stake, that might actually end up taking over everything, right? Because if you can get exactly the same network security as Bitcoin and the same level of decentralization as Bitcoin, but you're paying 1,000 times less, then why not, right? So the market might eventually start moving over some of the value to that blockchain as well. So yeah, it's something that will happen and evolve over time.
Okay. And by the way, do currently the Bitcoin world have the ESG, the sustainability, any practice on sustainability policies?
Uh, when you say the Bitcoin world, you're talking about like a company would have an ESG, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. There's no real company, is there?
Okay.
Right? But there's a lot of initiatives where there are mining pools that are, 100% run on. There are mining groups that are like 100% run on renewable energy and things like that. But these are all going to be individual, how do you say, entities driving their particular own agenda for being carbon neutral or minimal carbon footprint and things like that. But because there's no like CEO of Bitcoin to approve any ESG programs. You know, it's kind of hard to say that there's an ESG program for Bitcoin, but there's a lot of initiatives in the different communities that are driving that discussion. So it's much more organic. There's no like central control coming up with Bitcoin policies, but there are a lot of like blockchains that are coming up with, you know, planting X number of trees to offset their carbon footprint and things like that, right? But of course, being a decentralized technology, each of these are run by their own communities. But the answer is yes, there's some things like ESGs for Bitcoin and other cryptos, but it's not the company of Bitcoin that's doing it because it doesn't exist. Yeah.
Okay, just now when you talk about blockchain, there's a students asking about, is it safe? Is it safer to invest in blockchain rather than Bitcoin?
I'm not sure how to answer that because they are very different things, right? Bitcoin only exists because of the blockchain. Okay, actually, so when you say invest in the blockchain, like what a blockchain, you need to always ask what is it the company that you want to invest that's running on blockchain is doing, because ultimately, right, blockchain is just nothing but a very novel way of storing data. It's the blockchain exists only to store this historical data somehow, right? And if the company that you are trying to invest in is using that in a way where it's advantageous to use blockchain, and you see they might get a good share of the market because of that, then yeah, that's a company worth investing in. But if they are saying that, oh, you know, we're just using blockchain technology to replace our accounting department, or you know, it's some famous big company saying we're adopting blockchain, but no real value to using blockchain, it might be just better for them to use a, you know, AWS database or something like that. So, you know, why are you adopting blockchain in your company? If they cannot answer you that reason, then don't invest in those blockchain-based companies. So it's actually a very good question. I do appreciate that question because it highlights an issue that a lot of people coming into the space might, you know, just because someone uses blockchain doesn't mean it's the best solution, right? The technology itself enables this industry, but how you apply that technology really matters. So an investment, you need to take it investment by investment. That being said, I think the other end of your question is it better to invest in these companies coming up with blockchain tech versus buying Bitcoin? Um, I think it's your risk appetite, right? I would say many people would do both, right? Diversify a little bit. You might hold some in Bitcoin, some in this, some in that. That's not a bad idea, really. You know, to pick a few interesting projects that maybe jive with what your passions are or where you think is valuable. Invest in that, but no harm also holding some crypto assets, because you can think of investing in the base currency like Bitcoin or Ethereum or whichever, whether it's Cardano or any other projects that are coming up, right? As doing an almost like an index fund investment for that particular blockchain, right? Because any blockchain inventions that happen in that ecosystem will bring in more value, and therefore, if you're holding in Bitcoin and it brings in more value to the Bitcoin total market cap, then the Bitcoin goes up in price. So holding that Bitcoin is a good way of like generally investing in the space. But if you see that there are some blockchain companies that are filling a need that will definitely have value in the future, you can also, you know, invest in those. But really do your homework, because, you know, in 2017, almost every company coming up, just like I think it was Kodak that just said that they, you know, had a Kodak blockchain project and the price of the Kodak share went up like crazy amount. But at the end of the day, when you ask the question, what was the blockchain used for? There's no real reason, right? They just put it there because it was the buzzword of the day. You know, there was no real application that they could use it for, and therefore the value just went back down. So you need to be aware and be careful with all the buzzwords being thrown around. So blockchain is just one of the tools that exists in this ecosystem. Companies can use it to their advantage, but pay attention to how they are using it to their advantage as well.
Okay. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions.
While you're looking for
just now.
Hi, Mr. Joe.
Yes.
Hi.
This is Dr. Shaheen from ACFB. So I have two query. The first
Sure.
one, you told that when we do for cryptocurrencies, we can avoid the financial intermediations at the different stages. So if we can avoid or if we can reduce the financial intermediations in the different stages, so will it affect the performance of the financial institutions, particularly in terms of earning or the profit?
In terms of?
That means if we avoid the financial intermediations, that means we no need the financial intermediations, right? So if we avoid the financial intermediations by engaging cryptocurrency transactions, so will it affect the performance or the earnings of the financial institutions?
Well, I think you can look at it the other way, right? Like, take the banking as an example, as an intermediary.
Yeah.
Like right now, the banks are using their own payment rails to transact value over, in between them and all the other parties down the line. But if they adopt the technology of blockchain technology that is being used, for example, with either Ripple or Bitcoin to transact as well, they can also take advantage of these payment rails and reduce the cost of running those services. And there's always going to be a market of people who are not going to directly manage their own interfaces with the decentralized services, right? Because obviously, in some cases, they want to go to an institution. So those will always exist. And I think the institutions, they will actually adopt the technologies coming in to make it easier so that I think they will always exist, but maybe like you say, it will be affected, right? Because the insurance market is X amount globally, and if this decentralized system comes up, maybe 30 or 40% of that market gets absorbed into the decentralized insurance systems, then yes, the traditional insurance might be affected. But then, they also can offset that by adopting some of they can start offering the services at a cheaper cost to their customers and also build a market around that as well. The other argument is that in the economies that are locked outside of the global economy, right? Like in the world of Bitcoin and any of these things operating outside of whether it's the ringgit economy or the Thai economy or the US economy, that exists in a space that is unregulated normally. So whenever they interface back to your local economy, whether it's USD or ringgit, those institutions still need to exist because I don't see it that the regulators are going to be so comfortable dealing directly with the unregulated protocol. So you're going to always have that need for those businesses. But to your original question on whether they could be affected, the answer is yes, they could be affected for sure, right? But of course, there's always going to be a market of people that are not looking to manage their own insurance or investments or lending systems. So those will always be there. And I think it's just a shift in the value of these different markets in the future. So while it might affect the total, it might impact the total percentage of the market being shared out, but the overall value of that market might go up because you're introducing a lot more people who could not participate in this ecosystem before. So it's also possible that the entire ecosystem grows, whether it's a combination of the traditional insurance providers as well as the decentralized insurance providers, for example. Having more people being able to participate grows that market as well. So it could go both ways, but I do agree that what you say, it will have an impact.
Okay. My second question is, currently people are talking about NFT, non-fungible token. So
Okay.
my query is, this NFT is going to replace the cryptocurrencies or is a supplement of the cryptocurrencies?
Is my screen still being shared? I actually prepared some backup. Is my screen still shared up? I think it is. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So an NFT is just one more form of a digital asset. no, it will not replace the cryptocurrencies. What you can think of them are, okay, when you talk about NFTs, right, you're talking about a fungible versus a non-fungible token. So a good way of, I'll just spend a minute here, right? On the left-hand side is your, like, it could be Bitcoin, it could be gold, it could be ringgit. Like, I don't care if you need to pay me 10 Bitcoin. I don't care which 10 Bitcoin you give me. Like in the same way, like if you need to give me 10 ringgit, I don't care if it's 10 1 ringgit notes or 1 10 ringgit note or 5 plus, and things like that. So that's a fungible environment. And a non-fungible environment just means that if I need token A, you must give me token A. Now, it will not take over because these are actually supporting each other. The fungible market and the non-fungible market exist in parallel with each other. But what the non-fungible market brings, like right now, the most common is art. Like you hear about it in the news, a lot of buzz around art. But where you can go with this in the future is, like, for example, the deed to your house is going to be a non-fungible token. And non-fungible token means that if I get the deed of my house from sold to me, and someone sells it to me, it will leave his wallet and come into mine because it works like Bitcoin or any other digital asset. It's immutable. I can prove that it's moved to me. Then it has a value, right? It has value. Like if I own this, I can prove that I made that transaction with person A before and things like that. So these are the main differences, right? On one hand, it is a provably unique token. On the other hand, the fungible side, it is more like a currency. So no, the NFTs will not replace the digital assets. In fact, they are going to support each other to a very interesting extent. That particular market world is very interesting to look at, the potential that NFTs are going to bring into the digital asset world in the future. But yes, sorry, no, it will not replace Bitcoin or anything like that.
Okay, thank you so
Did I
much.
get the question right? Yeah. Did I get your question? Maybe I didn't understand the details, but if not, let me know if that answered it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it means that's another question. It means that investing in MFT is more risky than the coin.
Extremely so. It's, pros and cons. Like right now, that it's like a massive speculation market, right? People are buying in, assuming that the next person will buy it for more, right? It's very much speculation, but many of them actually have value. Like you have another buzzword that you hear in the markets today is the metaverse, right? And the
Yes.
metaverse, which Facebook renamed itself Meta because that's the direction they're going in, is building a world where everybody owns their own digital assets. And those digital assets can be digital virtual land in the virtual world. And those virtual land plots are going to be your NFTs of the future because no two land plots can be assigned to, different, no two plots should be alike, right? So each plot needs to be provably different. And owning the deed to that digital land plot is going to be the world of NFTs, right? It's not going to be, if you're just paying somebody and saying that you own that land, that's not a decentralized market because the ownership of that land is being decided by the game developer or the world developer to say that, okay, this person A owns this plot. But if I own the NFT in my own custody, in my own wallet, then I can prove that I own it and I can take it and I can sell it on the global market without permission of anyone as well. So um, yes, there is a lot of speculation in the NFT world. I think if you ask me, like if 99.9% of the NFT projects today will probably be a bad investment, but that that 0.1 or 1% on the edge, it is going to be fantastically impressive in what they're going to be able to do in the future. Which is that 1%? That's up to you. So by that definition, it is riskier because if you're aiming at 1% versus a market that
Yes.
you might end up just investing in really bad NFT projects. So be careful with that, right? It's
Okay.
all speculation right now.
Maybe I think we may like to more understand about the synergy, your company synergy.
Sure.
So your company allow all of us to open an account and buy and sell the cryptocurrencies. Am I right?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, so we can trade the cryptocurrency with ringgit Malaysia at the end of the day.
That is correct. That is
Okay,
correct.
so it's based on the lifetime pricing, right?
Yes. So I would like to. I would like to. Hang on, I'm on a VPN right now, so I'm not sure if because we have a lot of security to make sure that
Okay.
I'm allowed to come in, right? I am on the VPN right now, so yes, so let me just load up the page to make sure you guys can see what I'm seeing. Is my screen being shared up?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure why I cannot see what is being shared. Normally I can, but this time I can't.
Oh,
So
okay.
yes, so this is basically a marketplace. This is our marketplace in Synergy, and people come here to say they want to buy or want to sell in ringgit. That's what we are regulated for because we get to transact in ringgit. So you can imagine that this is a marketplace where you imagine going to a market if I want to buy Bitcoin, right? There's a bunch
Yeah.
of people here that come here and say, if I want to break it down easily, it's people coming in to say, I want to sell, I want to buy, I need to sell, or I need to buy. Right? If you think about these four statements, this can describe the entire market, right? Someone coming in to say, I want to sell, will put something for sale on the market, and someone else coming in saying, I want to buy, and if the price is matching, they will buy it. Or if I need to buy, they will just buy whichever is available in the market at the cheapest price, right? And it's opposite for the sell, right? So this is basically the platform that we operate, a centralized exchange that allows people to come in with their assets and say, I want to buy and I want to sell for ringgit. And this is where we would do. And I would recommend that when I provide the slides, I will provide a PDF to you after this
Okay.
presentation, okay, which you can
Yes.
distribute. And in that
Okay.
PDF, you also have the links to our synergy, details, as well as if there's any offers and things like that, we'll include it in the slide for anyone who wishes to sign up. So I'll provide the PDF to you guys after the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Is there a
when
question about marketplaces? Yeah.
okay, yeah. And when let's say when I purchase some cryptocurrency from Synergy, so can I trade in the other places like in the Bitcoin machine or wherever that can I
Yeah,
do
of
the
course.
yes. Oh, okay.
Whether it is whether you trade or in Malaysia, you can buy it, send it to Luno. Okay, here's interesting, right? If you look at the prices between different exchanges, no two exchanges will have the same price, right? So we actually promote something called. So this is a tool that allows we've generated for the market participants in Malaysia, where you can actually see the prices available at Luno and Tokenize. We built this before MX Exchange joined the list of regulated entities, so we will eventually add them in. But you see that there is no exchange that has the same price. A Bitcoin can have a different price in different exchange because every marketplace will have their own buyers and sellers that are in that marketplace, right? So what some people do as an investment is they will come, like in this case, if you were to buy as a maker, meaning someone that goes in there and says, I want to buy Bitcoin at this price and you take that Bitcoin and sell it in, so if you are a maker at Tokenize and you are you will be able to take that Bitcoin, right? come in marketplace, take that Bitcoin, go and sell it in tokenized, and make X amount of profit. Right, like right now you saw it jump because probably somebody that side made a very big purchase. The price fluctuated a lot, but of course this normalizes over time, right? But there's always a difference in the price between all the exchanges. So there are some people, these are called market makers, right? Or people that do arbitrage, that make money by buying and selling to normalize the spread. And it's a good way of looking at things. And yes, once you buy it at one exchange, you can send it to any other exchange or even any other global exchange outside of Malaysia, because that Bitcoin belongs to you 100%. It's not held in your account by Synergy. It belongs to you. You can move it anywhere you want.
So what is the liquidity over there?
Depends on the different exchanges. I think right now I don't think I know right now the largest would be Luno. They are, I think, a big. I think the 90+% of the market, and I think our current daily liquidity in Malaysia today is plus minus about 60 to 80 Bitcoin daily being transacted. So the volume is actually not bad. However, we do see that number going up. Don't forget that this volume is 3% adoption in Malaysian owners, right? So number one, that value is going up, and number two, Luno has been one of the bigger players from the global market that has entered the space prior to this. But I believe watch this space because while we are we are the smaller of the participants. We are based in Penang and we started from scratch, right? We are a fully Malaysian built company. We built our exchange from the ground up, and we are at the cusp of releasing our newer features that are coming out in Q1. So it'd be very interesting to watch this space, right? So do go and create an account and things like that. Get ready for all of that. Yeah.
Okay, so what is the requirement, like age for opening the account? The age?
18 and above, please. You need to be an adult in order to sign up for an account. You need to also have your. You will need to do KYC, right? Part of the regulation in Malaysia is you need to provide proof that you are who you are. And of course, when you want to transact with a bank account, whether you're depositing in or withdrawing out, you need to prove that you are the bank account owner, right? And that happens at sign up and registration. And when you register your bank account, as long as the names match up and the transactions happen, you'll be all right. So you will need to also have a proof of address to show that you are in Malaysia, and your bank account needs to be a Malaysian bank account or a ringgit bank account, basically, right? For you to transact within the ringgit exchange, ringgit pairs of the exchange.
So, but let's say I want to liquidate the Bitcoin. But I don't want to take the MYR ringgit. I want to take the USD. Is it possible?
Not at the moment, because in order to do USD, it's possible, but not in the Malaysian exchanges, because we are only doing Bitcoin/MYR or Bitcoin/BT, Bitcoin/MYR, ETH/MYR, Ripple/MYR, right? That's the pairs that are available to us. We don't have a USDT or stable coin yet. However, we are working on that. We are working with the regulators to try and find a path, because you also have to consider that once you start talking about stablecoin that is pegged to the US dollar, you sort of go into the realm of Bank Negara and things like that, right? Where they would have some concerns. So there are discussions that are going on, and hopefully, for all you know, that might be a thing in the near future. But of course, there's no way that I can guarantee that, right? But we do wish that we could have stable coins that allow us to directly trade into other currencies as well. Yeah, it'll take time probably.
Maybe my last question. Is it the exchange rate matter in this case?
Well, it matters to you, I guess, if you are going to change it to another currency. But when you say the exchange rate matter, meaning the price of Bitcoin, for example?
Yeah, I mean, when we are selling the Bitcoin and we get the MYR, so is it in the process, is it involve any exchange rate or element?
No, no, it doesn't, because the pairs that we see in the Malaysian exchanges are directly to Malaysian ringgit. So the markets over here are Malaysian ringgit price. So there's no exchange rate.
Oh, okay, okay. So this
Yeah.
price is only limit to the Malaysian market.
Yes, in fact, it's limited to their own exchanges. So you can see from the list below here, this is
Yeah.
the marketplace has its own price, Luno has its own price, and Tokenize has its own price, all within their own markets,
Oh, I
right?
see, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, when the price starts to fluctuate a lot, that's when your market makers come in and buy here, sell there, buy here, sell there. So they always end up normalizing again, right? Coming close to each other.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
maybe usually how long we need to wait if we want to sell it? Is it within a day or
Well, it depends. Like if we're honest, the Malaysian liquidity in all exchanges is not massive.
yeah,
But if you are doing, but you can do market buys, right? And if you
yeah.
do a market buy, then you can trade it instantly to whatever the best price is. If you're doing a limit order, then obviously it will depend on whether anyone is willing to buy at that price or more people are coming in and market buying the price lah.
Yeah.
So the answer is if you want it quickly, yes, we can do a market buy. That's fast. If you don't mind and you're trying to get a better price, then you can put it a bit away from market and go. I would say it depends. It depends purely on the market about when your order gets executed. We've done it before where you put a limit order out, it gets executed immediately because a lot of people are buying. There's some big news in the media today. And then sometimes when there's no news and the market's going the other way, it's just very quiet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the time is about 12 now. Maybe Mr. Job, you can give us a last word about the prospect of this crypto world and the investment opportunity there.
Okay. So again, like alluding back to what we spoke to earlier, right? The opportunities are there. The investment you will make in this space right now is speculative, right? That's without a doubt. You're assuming markets will adopt this technology in the future. But if they do adopt this technology because it is more frictionless to manage, then the amount of gains that you can get is big, right? Because obviously more value comes in, the more value your participation in those networks are. That being said, like right now, if you are looking for any investments in crypto outside of the five that are regulated in Malaysia, then you will need to also learn how to access the unregulated platforms, and that's not exactly something that I am going to be able to give much detail on. But you can, because a lot of these platforms will still require you to KYC and all that. Go ahead and, if you're investing in a particular currency, go to the one that I shared earlier, right? Which is the best place to start. Always go here, right? Um, Always end up, start your journey over here in CoinGecko preferably, because when you go into this place and you want to buy a particular crypto, go under markets and it will tell you which markets those currencies are being sold at, and then you can go and learn up how to participate in those markets. Right, most of them are going to be very straightforward exchanges. You sign up, you KYC, and then you need to buy and move funds in and things like that. So you might end up coming to the Malaysian exchanges, buying Bitcoin or Ethereum or Ripple or whatever, and sending it to these other exchanges and buying those other investments that you're interested in, and things like that, right? But for me, if you ask me, and this is my personal opinion, at the current adoption rate and the amount of markets that are come into the digital asset space, the entire industry is going to grow, right? That's my personal opinion. And that's the reason why we're in this business in the first place. But which parts of those like, yes, it's a $2 trillion market cap for crypto in whole, but doesn't mean that 10% will be this crypto or 50% will always be Bitcoin or 40% will be Ethereum. We don't know where the final numbers will rest based on the developments that are coming out. So make sure you do your research, go into the teams that are developing the currencies. Again, when you go into CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap, go to the pages that are talking about the currency. Look at who is developing behind it. The teams must be available. Don't go and invest heavily in a crypto that is anonymously developed, right? Because whoever it is can just run away with your money and you'll never be able to do anything, things like that. So you just need to be safe. And ultimately, if not sure, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay, so the time is here. And okay, thank you, Mr. Job, in sharing with us a very important knowledge of cryptocurrency. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank again Malaysian Financial Planning Council (MFPC) and School of Economics, Finance and Banking (UUM) in making this webinar success. So now is the end of this webinar. I hope all of us are enlightened by the sharing, with the sharing of by Mr. Job today. And I hope you all enjoy this session. Since most of the time I'm interacting with Mr. Job, but I tend to ask quite common questions that maybe you are also you have the same question with me. So I hope you guys can enjoy this kind of sessions. So I hope I hope we can invite Mr. Job to come back again to us and share with us more updated information about this cryptocurrency in the near future. Okay, so that's all for today. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Job, and thank you all the attendees here.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for spending time with us.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.
Okay, take care, everyone. Can you share the attendant QR code?